there, Michelle here from Chelle McQuaid TV, where we're helping you find ways to move from functioning to flourishing by putting the latest science to the real-world test. Today, I feel very, very privileged to have with us one of the leading lights of the field of positive organisational scholarship, Professor Jane Dutton. Jane Dutton is a professor of business administration and psychology at the University of Michigan. Her current research focuses on how organisational conditions enable human thriving. In particular, she focuses on how the quality of connection between people at work affects individual and organisational flourishing, and one of her main research areas explores compassion and organisations. She's a co-founder of the Centre for Positive Organisations, consults and works with a variety of companies, and has received countless awards for her achievements and contributions. In her spare time, Jane has published over 100 articles and book chapters, edited 12 books, and written a book for managers called Energize Your Workplace: How to Build and Sustain High-Quality Connections at Work. And her newest book is entitled How to Be a Positive Leader: Small Actions, Big Impact. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm so happy to be here.
Jane, I was lucky enough to hear you speak last year on compassion in organisations. But is compassion something organisations can really afford?
Oh, Michelle, that's such an important question. Again, our stand is that compassion is something all businesses cannot afford to miss or to cultivate. The benefits that we have found in our work on compassion, on having compassion at work, far exceed even what our expectations were. I think we knew going in that it would make a difference to people in terms of recovering from major setbacks and minor setbacks in their lives. So compassion heals, but we were not prepared for the other kinds of benefits that compassion seems to foster in workplaces. So, for example, it turns out that experiencing compassion at work, either directly or witnessing compassion, can make people more committed and more attached to their workplaces. It's a very important source of sort of meaning and connectivity to workplaces. A second set of findings, I think, which were surprising to us, is how experiencing or witnessing compassion changes how people think about their work organization. I don't think that's that surprising. Their peers, but also how it changes how they see themselves. So receiving compassion from someone at work, either in the face of, again, small incidences of pain or very large ones, like losing a loved one, changes how you think about yourself as a person. So you can think about sort of compassion as investments in people's significance, and they're really important sources of personal meaning at work.
So, given all of those benefits, why do you think we don't see more compassion in workplaces?
Well, first I should say that I actually think that there's quite a bit of compassion going on because it's such a deep human instinct, but it's oftentimes sort of below the radar because people don't see it as legitimate. In fact, one of the major, I think, barriers to compassion at work is the problems that occur around noticing pain. And one of my colleagues who I've worked with closely over the years, Peter Frost, used to say, there's always pain in the room. So because people have lives, there's always suffering. But in organizations, sometimes it doesn't feel safe to both express suffering, and sometimes it doesn't feel safe to respond with care. So oftentimes the compassion process gets sort of truncated or stopped right at the beginning of the process. So that's a major impediment. A second impediment is because few organizations actually reward people for caring for their fellow coworkers. That also is something that can repress compassion, and particularly where, again, if you express that you're suffering, that's seen as weak. So in organizational systems, which are kind of the systems of competent heroes, suggesting that you may be depressed, or you may be sad, or the other kinds of things that go along with suffering. People sometimes withheld, and therefore compassion can never even begin to be kind of released and expressed in a work organization. A third sort of impediment is the absence of empathy in organizations. So if you can think about compassion as a process that involves noticing, empathizing, or having empathic concern for another person, and then actually the responding to the pain. In any one of those sort of stages, the process can be shut down. And, unless an organization is really cultivating a capacity for people to take the perspective and to care about other people in a meaningful way, again, that critical feeling state, which is so important to the compassion process, can be shut down. Finally, I'll mention one other barrier, and that is that oftentimes people feel like they don't know what to do, so they do nothing. So sometimes it can be tricky in organizations about trying to figure out how to act appropriately when someone is suffering, because, again, sometimes the suffering is coming from people's personal lives, and sometimes, that is thought crossing the boundary between sort of personal and professional is seen as problematic. Sometimes people just comes from different cultural or family backgrounds where, again, what it means to care is different. So in the face of that ambiguity or that uncertainty, sometimes people choose not to act. And so we have found in our work that actually having leaders that model compassion and care, that gets people over the hump, of sort of worrying that they might not do what's appropriate, but just, again, if they're in an organization where leaders model, just do something. That can, again, unleash this sort of very natural healing force of compassion.
When you explain it like that, it makes it so clear. And I can think back on times when I've probably been that person you were just describing. So Jane, what can we do to bring more compassion into our workplaces through our own actions?
Well, I'm going to go back to, again, this idea that there are these three moves or three sort of key phases in the process. And first suggest, again, take that idea that there's always pain in the room seriously. And I think it's always better to err in sort of the on the side of caring more rather than less. So if it seems that they're suffering in some way, I think simply providing a safe place for people, if they choose to express that suffering, is really important. A second piece I would suggest is don't judge. Don't judge. One of the biggest, again, impediments to compassion, which I actually didn't mention, is kind of when people start to try to make sense of why someone might be behaving some way, if they don't think that someone is worthy, or they make judgments that actually, again, would hold them back from acting in a compassionate way, that can also get in the way. So don't judge. And then the third thing I would say is don't worry about doing the right thing or acting perfectly. I mean, sometimes just being with a person or just witnessing their pain is enough. That is compassion. Sometimes it's compassion at its best. So I think showing up and being present for another person can be sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do, especially in workplaces where, the pace is moving so fast, where people feel like there's not even time to express what they're feeling. Providing a safe space where people can be with their pain sometimes is simply enough.
I love, love, love that idea. I don't have to fix it, I don't have to solve it, but just by sitting with someone and letting them be heard, I can be of service. Jane, where can people go if they want more resources on compassion in workplaces?
Well, I think, hopefully a useful place for people to start might be to go to our website. It's called www.compassionlab.com. And since we've been doing work for about 10 years, kind of in this domain of compassionate work, we found lots of really useful websites ourselves. And so one of the things on our website is that we provide links to other resources and centers and sort of where zones of activity around compassion in organizations more generally. You can also also download all of our papers off of there, and hopefully that would be a good place to start.
Jane, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Michelle. It was a joy to talk with you as always.
Part of learning more is keeping your eyes out for Jane's new book in May, How to Be a Positive Leader. And if you're wanting a little more in the meantime, make sure you look at the website for the Centre of Positive Business. It has some wonderful free videos that you can see right across this research area. Also, make sure you check out the Compassion Lab at compassionlab.com. Of course, if you're wanting more practical, tested and playful ways to move from functioning to flourishing, be sure to head on over to michellemcquaid.com, leave your name and email address so you can hear all our news first. Remember, you are good enough, so don't be afraid to let your light shine. Until next time, take care.